So I'm back at it again to make a follow-up video to my Divinity 3 videos. This time it is a little bit different. So I realize I have a tendency to go off the top of my head with videos and I don't often script them. I've never scripted a video before to my knowledge. I figured I'd give it a try though, so I'm not missing anything this time. I don't really think an introduction is needed on this point with a scripted video. Suffice to say I don't like Larian's direction for Baldur's Gate, and I'm going to get into exactly why that's the case. So I'm going to start off with something a bit different this time, and that's the story. I do have a tendency to get lost on other topics when I talk about this game, but the story, and as people rightly say, is crucial to any game, and it's most often what leaves me with a lasting impression. I'm sure the same is true for many people. So the question for me then is, why are people so optimistic and defensive about Divinity 3 for story implications? Now, without delving deep into spoilers for people that might want to go back and play the original Baldur's Gate games, I can say quite definitively that the focal conflict of Baldur's Gate is over, and anyone that's played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and their expansions will know what I'm talking about. Our character in Baldur's Gate goes through a lot of stuff, a lot of hardship, self-discovery, and a lot of evolution towards a finale that can't really go anywhere else. So where are we really left to go from there? The answer's simple, somewhere else entirely. Now, myself nor anyone else can say that's definitively a bad thing, because we don't know yet. We need to know the details of the story. But at the same time, anyone optimistic over the prospects of great writing and characterization that we saw in prior Baldur's Gate games should be cautiously optimistic at best, I would say. I think you might have to trade the good writing in for generic high fantasy tropes. There's really very little to say on the story front because frankly we don't really know much about Divinity 3 right now. All we know definitively is that it's not going to be relating to the same conflict as prior games. And again, for people that loved Baldur's Gate's story, I have to ask, what is it that makes you so defensive about this departure from a different studio entirely and the notion that they can make something as good? I don't really understand it. I can only speak from my experience, but I really don't see the potential for this game to exceed or be anywhere near as good as the stories told in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. This developer has yet to prove themselves on a story front for me whatsoever. Nothing about their games pulled me in or made me think their lore was unique, their stories were unique, their characters were unique, or were telling any kind of exceptional story. And I don't know, it's not something I see with Divinity frequently, is that the story is lauded as being amazing. Not something I see in terms of praise for Larian's games. Moving on from that though, because there's nothing else to say except, I guess, keep your hopes high. Mine are not, based on prior experiences. So, the benefits of real-time with pause versus turn-based. Was real-time with pause ever good? And what's the problem with turn-based anyway? So, those of you that have watched my prior videos will know that one of my main gripes with Divinity 3 is the genre change. Why is that so important? Well, let me ask you, why do we play video games? The story? Okay, yeah, no doubt, that's true, that's very important as well. But gameplay is pivotal. It's what we're doing in terms of interacting with a game. Having both amazing gameplay and story is key to making something really special. Those aspects are key to making any masterpiece, frankly, of a game that anyone would consider a masterpiece. Fantastic gameplay and story, not to mention other things like sound design, music, etc. So real-time with pause, and in particular with Baldur's Gate systems, gives you complete flexibility. I've said this before, but you can do what you want and dictate the flow of battle, or just the game in general with your own skill and knowledge. And let me be clear, the ability to pause at will in a game like this, isometric, where you're seeing all the action in front of you, makes you the master of the game. It gives you the ability to use your abilities whenever you want, wherever you like, giving you freedom, and it allows you to actually be part of the role-playing experience and fashion your character's personality as you see fit. Some of you might be thinking, what does he mean by, fashioning your character's personality in terms of gameplay, and how does that relate to Divinity? Well, let me clarify a bit and elaborate. So, real-time with pause isn't the genre dictating how you can play. We know this from Baldur's Gate, and Baldur's Gate's the obvious, example of this gameplay genre I'm referencing. So you're not being manhandled by some arbitrary scripted sequencing that thrusts you into a combat scenario and changes the rules, limits your freedom and options in and outside of combat. So for example, if I want to cast a fireball in the middle of a friendly town, let me do that. Let me cast any spell I like, and I'll deal with the consequences afterwards. This direction to change the genre of the game doesn't only extend to the actual combat in the game, it extends to how you can interact with the game. We've seen it in Divinity. You are put on a set of training wheels, essentially. In the field, you can't cast certain spells, you can't do certain things, but as soon as you're in combat, you're in a combat stance, you can do things related to combat, which you otherwise would not be able to do outside of combat. Oh, but Lokizara, why is that so important? Freedom is important in a role-playing game. Switching gears to turn-based a little bit, people will be familiar with my feelings, no doubt, but if you're new, I find turn-based often quite predictable, slow, frequently in a lot of games, and just frankly played out. I find it often hampers the freedom and creativity you get and your own ability to interact with the world in meaningful ways, which also enables you to craft the character's personalities as you see fit. If I want to make a psychopath who goes around murdering people, and I want to deal with the consequences after, I should be allowed to do that. I really should, and that extends not only to dialogue, but it should extend to gameplay as well, and it did in Baldur's Gate. What you said wasn't the only thing that impacted what was going on around you. You could do whatever you wanted, frankly. And in addition to this, I've said this before, but I feel most JRPGs do the turn-based genre far better than Western games do. Just from my experience, and I find they have far greater ingenuity and innovation, not only in gameplay, but they tell far better stories as well. Divinity is a game that limits your freedom of movement. It shoves training wheels on you when you encounter enemies in the field. It changes the rules of what you can and can't do when you're inside and outside of combat. And in terms of story, lore, universe, and whatnot, I got the impression it was just a typical high fantasy, tropey game with barely any unique personality to speak of, and I'm just surprised that people find themselves getting attached to this aspect of Divinity, the story. Now, I'll completely admit, beyond what I've said so far, it is quite difficult to articulate why I feel it's such a step down without having a visual comparison, which you can find on my last video. I'd encourage people to have a look at that, because it covers quite a lot. But in short, this is what I feel about turn-based. I feel for the most part, especially with Divinity from my experience, it's slow, it's cumbersome, it's a played-out genre we see way too much of, it lacks freedom, and it discourages player creativity by limiting your options outside of combat. Divinity to me embodies these points, and it's going in an opposite direction as to what Baldur's Gate used to be, and people somehow can't understand why me and other hardcore old-school fans are disappointed with this direction. And if I wasn't making it clear enough, this lack of freedom and this discouragement of player creativity isn't just limited to being in or outside of combat, it's both. I don't need training wheels in a combat scenario. I don't need things to be slowed down to where I'm micromanaging every tiny little thing I do. I can do multiple things at once. My brain can allow for that. Okay? If I'm new to real-time with pause, it might take some time to adjust to having that much freedom, but once I do, I will be grateful for it. So we'll come back to the genre change, the reasons for it, and what exactly they're thinking by doing it. Just before that, let's switch gears into something else. So, graphics and visuals, and how do they play into things? What's the general perspective here, and what's my opinion? So, a lot of people were talking about this, and it's something I definitely should have talked about ahead of time. My initial reaction to the visuals was, they look nice. Looking at it on a surface level, you've got this amazing CGI trailer as well, which looks great. With the mind flayers, the illithids and stuff. But another issue, frankly, relating to Divinity 3 is the visual style. I'm not talking about just plain graphics, texture quality, and stuff like that. I'm talking about the artistic change, how everything looks. So, really, if you think about it and look at it, and then look at the old games, it's quite blatant to anyone being objective that Divinity 3 is a copy and paste of Divinity 2 from a graphical standpoint, not to mention other things. So, why is this a problem, some people might be thinking? Well, the problem is that it doesn't look like Baldur's Gate. It doesn't maintain the kind of gritty realism it was going for. It almost goes for a cross between what a Baldur's Gate sequel might look like and something like Diablo 3. It's not quite as extreme as Diablo 3, but it almost has this cartoony aspect to it where I'm not getting a great sense of realism. I would say the main point here is that Baldur's Gate Classic goes more for realism and a gritty world. Something that's not really very welcoming, that's quite brutal, and that will chew you up as a player as well, and that you have to actually learn. Divinity 3, on the other hand, has this kind of colourful aesthetic. Everything's got to look picture perfect, you know? Like, it feels almost stereotypical of modern game design, especially Western in that sense, in terms of a lack of creativity. Let's just make things look pretty. What I'm getting at is the Infinity Engine games, and Baldur's Gate in particular, really do look unique. There's not really anything out there that looks like it artistically. Divinity 3 to me looks like Dragon Age, or something in this Western fantasy genre that you come to expect. I don't really know that it looks very unique and sets itself apart visually from other games out there, especially nowadays. And to be clear, graphics extend not only to, in-game textures, character models, and animations, but also to UI and menu assets. And once again, what do we have here? What reminiscence do we have to, the excellent UI aspects of the original Baldur's Gate games? All the detail. Think about that, guys. From anyone that's played the prior games, you'll never forget the UI. You'll never forget the bars on either side with your character portraits and whatnot, your spell menus, your shortcuts, your ability slots, how everything looks, how everything blends into the world around you. What do we have here? Do we have a return to any of that? No. What are you thinking? Have you not learned by now? What we have is another copy and pasted element from Divinity 2 that finds itself back into Divinity 3, just like most aspects of this game. And just to wrap up on this whole presentation thing, Divinity's UI is just way too busy. Like, there's just way too much crap on the screen, and don't even get me started on the character inventory screens with the dozens upon dozens of inventory slots. And this kind of extends to another thing in terms of how you're interacting with the game. These slots are filled up with junk most of the time, because you'll go through an environment, and this is kind of like a trope with modern games for some reason. You just can interact with everything for no reason, and pick up everything for no reason a lot of the time in an environment. This game falls into that trap, and it's just not, like, I think Matthew Matosis actually put it best in his Dark Souls 2 critique. I judge a game's value and fun based on what I'm actually doing in the world rather than how much stuff I have in my inventory. And a lot of games now seem to have that problem where it's like, oh, you're picking up stuff, so that's fun, isn't it? It's irrelevant. Again, you think back to Baldur's Gate, 99% of the things you're picking up are actually relevant, and there's not just a load of clutter on your screen. And yeah, I realize a lot of these things serve an end to crafting purposes as well in these games, but it's not a presentable way to do things at all. Like having dozens of boxes right in my face and then having me sift through everything once I've been through a dungeon. Not a great presentation and not a good user end experience in my opinion. In short, on a surface level the game looks good, but the visuals are generic. They're unfaithful to prior games. They're uncreative. They look like just about everything else out there nowadays. And they copy and pasted from Divinity 2, and they're another shortcoming. From everything we've covered so far, I get the very strong impression that Larian want to please their fans from Divinity and to absorb newcomers, frankly. I don't feel like they care about classic Baldur's Gate fans at all, from what I've seen. And this leads into my next topic. So, why would they change the genre in the first place and reuse Divinity 2's assets, which is, again, blatantly obvious to anyone being objective and using their eyes and their brains? So, Larian's senior designer, Edward Imbert, gave us a pretty clear answer if our eyes weren't telling a clear enough story to begin with. So I did mention this article in the comments of my original Divinity 3 video, but I'm going to mention it here and just speak more about what I think and what it boils down to. So it reads, one of the main reasons for Divinity 3 to use turn-based combat, in Edward's opinion, was because the older real-time pause system makes the game look messy, whereas everyone understands turn-based logic. He said, I'm critical of real-time with pause because I think that it looks messy. It's like a miss pause, give 3 orders, a miss pause. Also, I don't believe that sticking to the old system can expand to a greater audience. The thing with turn-based logic is that everybody understands it. It's my turn, it's your turn. And we have this experience with it. It worked for us with Divinity Original Sin, it worked for us with Divinity Original Sin 2, and D&D is turn-based. So, let's break it down. What does this mean? A, It means Edward doesn't believe modern gamers will allow themselves to become accustomed to faster flows of gameplay with more on screen and more options at the player's disposal. B, it means Larian have the benefit of rehashing Divinity 2's gameplay and graphical assets to save on production costs and blow smoke up the buttholes of their current player base. C, it means that as well as pleasing their existing fan base with something familiar to them, i.e. people that aren't necessarily Baldur's Gate fans at all, they also have the opportunity to attract other new people entirely, thereby further isolating and devaluing the fans that really care about the original IP to begin with. Gee whiz, I don't know about you guys, but I get the impression that Edward thinks the old fans are going to be holding the game's monetary potential back. And I think the reason for all this is so that they can indeed expand to a greater audience, as came from his mouth directly. And what better way to do that and save on production costs than copy and pasting what you already have that's got a rampant fan base behind it already that can't accept opinions of fans of a usurped IP that they shouldn't be touching to begin with. So let's summarize this point. The benefits here to Larian as a studio are just clear to anyone looking at the situation and, the quoted part of the story here objectively. Monetary benefit, the opportunity to go mainstream, copy and paste in original assets from another game, saving on work as well and production costs, the dumbing down of a gameplay system that many people don't want to take the time to learn, just to appeal to a mainstream audience. Well, gee, maybe it will be successful, but sadly, not for all the good reasons I'd hoped. Oh, but Loki Zara, you madman. Baldur's Gate D&D is turn-based. It's supposed to be turn-based. What are you talking about? Let me let you in on something. Baldur's Gate is a video game franchise, excluding Dark Alliance, which most people enjoyed but don't really care about to hold to the same standards. Baldur's Gate, as an isometric RPG, is not turn-based, and it doesn't benefit from being turn-based for all the reasons I've listed throughout this video. No amount of insulting in the comments is going to change my mind. We can discuss these points, but you have to accept that some hardcore fans of the originals do not see this as a beneficial change. It's not just relating to the gameplay genre, it's relating to the style of the game, the visual style. Does it look like Baldur's Gate? Does it feel like Baldur's Gate? Will it have a story like Baldur's Gate? Is there a reason for this sequel? Is the story going anywhere? The story's finished in Baldur's Gate 2. Where do they have to go? What is the point of this sequel? I think Edward made it clear, didn't he? Ultimately, what this comes down to is choice. Inside and outside of combat. In classic Baldur's Gate, you didn't transition into a combat scenario or a combat stance, right? You can do whatever you want. Of course, there's scripting like story-centric NPCs. In some cases, you can't kill, otherwise the story cannot progress. That's the case of every game, understandable. But generally speaking, with the example I gave about the Adventurers Mart, I can go in and just kill everyone if I want to. If I want to, it's not like, oh, you have to be in combat to be able to cast Flame Arrow at Ribald. It's like, no, I can do that if I feel like it. And yeah, that's just what it comes down to, is having the choice. So we're getting close to the summary here, and really the final topic I want to discuss is, why do I care so much? And, isn't change a good thing, really? Do we want the same old games coming back? Because I think some people might present this argument. Some people have, in fact, presented this. We want new experiences. First and foremost, what I'd say to these people, and I present this argument, and, people usually understand what I'm saying, even if they disagree and want new experiences. Well, the thing is, real-time pause isn't common nowadays, so essentially it is a new experience, especially to modern gamers. We don't get games like Baldur's Gate anymore, really, aside from like Pillars of Eternity and Pathfinder, which I need to get to at some point. Meanwhile, turn-based is rampant, and we got loads of excellent turn-based games out there already, so I don't see this notion that, oh, well, turn-based is new. It's really not. On the other hand, again, we don't see real-time pause games much. And coming back to the point there, isn't change a good thing, really? It can come about in positive ways on occasion. I feel like a sequel should stay in line in terms of its genre with the prior entries, but just enhance elements of them. Persona's done that consistently. you know, Persona 3 to 4 to 5, you really see the gameplay evolution. It's just gotten better and better while maintaining this identity and this core gameplay characteristics and just improved everything. And then you just take a look at Divinity 3 from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and it's like, you know, what happened? Why is it like this? It's just crazy to me. Divinity 3 will not be a Baldur's Gate game. It will be a Baldur's Gate game in name only. It will not be a Baldur's Gate game in terms of gameplay, personality, story, uniqueness, or spirit. Period. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I know there's going to be some people more optimistic who are going to want to dive headfirst into Divinity 3, and then there's going to be people on my side who are like, no, this isn't Baldur's Gate. You know, same with prior videos, I've got plenty of people on both sides. For the people that are more optimistic about Divinity 3, I would say have at it, but to be frank, I prefer a game like this wasn't supported, but who am I to stop anyone, you know? It's only that people say, you know, oh, it doesn't affect you. Well, it does, because if this game is successful, future games will be in this style. And it's probably going to be successful because, you know, again, Larian have garnered such a big, committed fan base with Divinity. They're just going to see this as Larian's next game rather than an actual sequel to an IP that people cared about long ago, a classic IP that should be respected and is not being respected. So that's it from me, guys. Feel free to engage in the comments below. I do always enjoy looking over the comments. I may not respond to everyone, but you can be assured that I'm looking. The volume I got on the original Divinity 3 video I made was very surprising to me. Wasn't expecting that much interactivity. So yeah, that's it for now. I'll speak to you guys down below. Peace.